using our new employee spreadsheet. It has taken longer than expected to deliver these spreadsheets to you, but our partners and us have been working hard to produce accurate and streamlined spreadsheets based on the newest set of IRS guidelines. The result is a set of simplified documents aimed at making everybody's lives easier without compromising accuracy nor the integrity of the data you'll be submitting to us. We have also renamed the files in order to be more descriptive of the information requested and to readily identify the company and reporting periods. These are the data retrieval forms for variable hour employers. As mentioned, they have been renamed to better reflect. These are the data retrieval forms for variable hour employers. As mentioned, they have been renamed to better reflect what each one of the files are. DAI stands for Diversified Administration Incorporated, ACA, 1095C, variable hour, employee data. Your company name will be entered here, and the month and year that's being reported. If you're submitting several months, you may enter the first month and the last month of the reporting period. Then for those that are self-insured, there's a second file, dependent data file, that we'll go over a little later. This is the new variable hour employer employee data spreadsheet. We've added some new features and we've changed the color codes on each one of the sections in order to make it easier to read. One of the new additions is this information box that asks for the employer information, the period that's been reported, filled by is the person that actually filled the spreadsheet. And we're asking for this information in case we have any questions or we need more information about any of the entries in the spreadsheet. And we'll need to contact this person, so we also ask for their phone and email. To the right, you'll also find that we've added some help tools here. And as you can see, this asks that or explains that you must use one row or line per employee, enter dates as month, days, and year. If additional explanation is needed, you can use the notes in the first column. This is a notes column where you can enter any additional information that you believe we will need in order to understand the information entered for any particular employee. If you are a self-insured employer, you'll have to fill the dependent spreadsheet that we mentioned a moment ago. If there were changes during the month, you'll have to copy the employees row and enter the changes with the corresponding dates. And I'll explain in a moment how to do that. You also may find additional help in the comments by hovering over some of the titles. For example, in this green section, that is the employee section, you'll find that for the employee SSN, there is an explanation that this is the employee's Social Security number and that it is a required field. Last name is also a required field, as well as the first name. The middle initial is not required. And so on for the address, the city, the state, the zip code, and the country code is only required if it is an address outside of the United States. Black section is the employment section. And you have the following columns: hire date, term date, job status, employee status, status begin date, status end date, and company or division. Company or division for employers that had only one EIN and one division, in the previous version of the spreadsheet, we allowed these columns or this column to be blank. Unfortunately, that brought some confusion, so now it is required to enter the company name for each employee, even if you only have one EIN. The hire date is, of course, the date of hire of the particular employee, but this is not a required field because there will be instances in which a person will be listed that is not an employee. For example, a spouse. A spouse may be listed if the spouse elected COBRA. In that case, the person will be listed here, but there will be no hire date. The term date, again, is not required because it will have to be blank until there's a termination. The job status is a required field and now has only three options: full-time, variable hour, and non-employee. Per the ACA, variable hour also includes part-time employees. So if you have a part-time employee, you will use VH for them. Employee status, you only have three options now: active, termed, and leave. And it is a required field also. These two new fields, status begin date and status end date, are related to changes in either the job status or the employee status. Similarly, the status end date when the status changes, and the company or division where the employee works. So let's try an example to better illustrate how the information will be entered in this section. Let's say a particular employee was hired on March 15th. So that date will be entered here. Term date will be left blank. And let's say this employee was hired as a full-time employee. So you'll put FT under job status. And he is an active employee. So under employee status, you will enter active. And in this first case, the status begin date will be the same as a hire date because it'll correspond to the date in which also the first job status for that employee will begin. And of course, the status end date when there's a change of status. Now let's say that this particular employee changed from being a full-time to being a part-time or variable hour employee. So the hire date will remain the same. The term date will remain blank. The job status will change from FT in the previous row to VH on this new row. His employee status will remain active. But since this is a new status and it happened on April 15th, the status begin date will be April 15th. And the status end date for the previous status will be the day before, which will be April 14th. And of course, the status end date for this new status will remain blank until such a day in which there's a new status change. If an employee changed divisions within a company or changed to another company within the group of companies, then that will also count as a status change. You'll have to indicate that change by entering a new column, a new row for that particular employee. The red section has to do with the employee's income. And you can see that before, in the previous spreadsheet, there were three additional columns, which were the pay period from, pay period to, and the payroll date. Per the new IRS guidelines, this information is not needed, so we're not asking for it anymore. The first column in this section is a pay status. It has the options of salary, hourly, daily, or session. They pay frequency, weekly, biweekly, semi-monthly, or monthly. The hours worked are still the hours worked during the month that has been reported. The dollars paid are any amounts that are paid to the employee that are not the regular pay, or in cases like, for example, when a school hires a coach and pays the coach a lump sum, and the coach works for a couple of months training the football team. In those cases, you'll enter in the following column, dollars paid comments, what those dollars paid were for. The blue section is for the coverage itself. You have the plan ID, coverage type begin date, coverage type end date, eligible for coverage with no offer given, and unaffordable coverage offered. The plan ID will be the plan descriptor that you would have entered in the compliance review that now we call the employer spreadsheet. This is not a required field because there will be instances in which a particular employee might not have coverage, and we'll see that in a moment. The coverage type is a required field and now has a new set of options. You have not offered, limited non-assessment period, insured, waived, not eligible, COBRA elected, COBRA waived, and union provided if the coverage was through a union or union sponsored. The coverage type begin date is a required field and relates to the beginning of the coverage type. If the coverage began the previous year, then the date that you'll enter in this column will be January 1st, 2015. Otherwise, if it started anytime during the year, you'll enter the date the coverage started in the month that's being reported. The coverage type end date will remain blank until such a time that the coverage ends. The eligible for coverage with no offer given. Per the new ACA rules, the IRS is allowing employers to offer at least to 70% of their employees a coverage, which means that you may not offer coverage up to 30% of your employees. So if a particular employee was not offered coverage, you will enter yes. For yes, they were eligible, but no coverage was offered. You will indicate this in the coverage type as not offered, and there will be a begin date, which will be the start date of the coverage for this employee if he would have been offered coverage. Similarly, the coverage type end date will correspond to the date in which the non-coverage or non-offering will end. An affordable coverage offered, you will indicate with a yes here if your company offered coverage but per the ACA guidelines was not affordable. So this will be entered in a similar way as if the employee was offered coverage. For example, he might be insured because he took the coverage. He might have waived it, and that will be entered here in this column. The begin date will be the same, the start date of the coverage, end date whenever the end of that coverage occurs. And the only difference with a regular coverage, again, is that it will be indicated that it's unaffordable here with a yes. And that is the employee spreadsheet for variable hour employers. you have any questions or need any help in filling this new spreadsheet, please do not hesitate to contact me at your convenience. If your company is fully insured, you will not need to fill the dependent data spreadsheet. But if you are self-insured, you will need to fill this file. So let's take a look at it. As you can see, this spreadsheet is pretty self-explanatory. We've added the notes column in order for you to add any additional explanation to help us understand the data that's been provided. You have the employee social security number, the dependent social security number, the dependent's first name, the dependent's last name, the dependent's relationship to the employee, the dependent's date of birth, the dependent's start date and dependent's end date for coverage. And again, this is only required for self-insured plans. And this is the dependent data spreadsheet. And again, if you need any help or have any questions, please feel free to call me. The new deadline to receive the employee spreadsheets is Friday, November 6, 2015. This deadline has been pushed because of the delay in producing and getting these spreadsheets to you. But we will need the spreadsheets with information for up to October by this date. And I can be reached at 954-983-9970 if you have any questions, or you can email me directly at Sandro, that is SANDRO, at div125.com. Thank you very much for attending this training, and have a great day.